All right, so here we are, and I have bothered Rob Walling because I need to talk to him. January over at Owner Insider is all about email marketing and stuff like that, and you were the man for Drip, and we have so much we have to talk about. We have to talk about that. We have to talk about Tiny Seed, and I think I'll start with some loud noise first. Kind of a Soundgarden theme, don't you think? Doesn't that have a sort of...
That Soundgarden, I was thinking Rally Around the Family with a Pocket Full of Shells. Who is that?
Yes, that's a Rage Against the Machine. Yep. It's right in between the two, maybe.
It is. Yeah.
Could be Audio Slave. So Rob, I dragged you on again because you were the man behind Drip, and right before suddenly the world has reinvented or rediscovered email marketing, it feels like, or email newsletters that you could sell, for instance, like Substack. Right before that, I really and I don't have to kiss your butt. I don't need anything from you. I mean, a bag of donuts or something. Right before this, Drip was one of the first times that I'd seen something in a while where I was like, oh, well, that's pretty clever, because it was the automation stuff that we needed, but written like a human would implement it, and not an email marketing ninja. I know it's been 1,000 years now since Drip has moved on into the lead pages world, but can you talk a little bit about what the spark was that got your eyebrows raising up for that?
Yeah, for sure. First off, thanks for having me on, and appreciate the compliments. Drip, we had the advantage when we were building Drip of having other pioneers having gone ahead of us. And so we watched MailChimp implement things. We watched Infusionsoft. We watched these other bigger players just try to figure it out. And by the time Infusionsoft and who was it? It was Entreport / their Office Autopilot, I think was their name before that. But they had implemented things that I would say had a lot of legacy to them. And so we were able to come in 2013 really and say, oh, automation is it's becoming a thing. And they had proven the market out. And we were kind of like the second mover in the space. There were dozens of players, but we were like the second wave almost. There was us, and then ConvertKit was shortly after us. And even ActiveCampaign was kind of on the scene at the same time. So that's what we did. And we really did sit down. We were very user experience focused, right? It's called UX, but it's like, how do we take this pretty powerful, but really complicated thing and try to make it simpler without dumbing it down? And that was the goal of doing Drip. And we didn't have to invent it a piece at a time, because when you do that, you get this debt, right? This technical debt and this user experience debt that we didn't have to experience because we were, going after that.
That's the two things. You just nailed both. It's like, can it be simple but not stupid? And can I do this in a way that it feels like there's just zero legacy to it?
Yeah.
And that's interesting. Was that the wrong words are in my head, but sort of the design spec? Did you sit with somebody in a whiteboard and say, here's what it's got to be? It's got to be super slim. It's got to be sleek and fun, and it's got to be powerful, even though you don't have to know a lot of things to do it. What was that language like at that moment?
Yeah, it was coming. There was a lot of customer requests who were saying, I use Infusionsoft, I use Entreport or Pardot, Marketo, these big marketing automation systems,
right.
and I want, but it's so expensive and it's so confusing. So they were almost coming down, I would say, really expensive, and they wanted less expensive, easier to use. And then there were a lot of folks who were using MailChimp and Aweber, who were like, these are great systems, but they don't do anything. They didn't have any automation at the time, right? You couldn't tag, you couldn't do, click a link to trigger any automate, just anything. And so we were listening to those and saying, is there an in-between here where there's a nice MailChimp Aweber feature set with some automation added on in an elegant way? And so, we sat at a whiteboard and we said, what's everything that all these systems do? And how many of these do we want to implement? And how do we make it super elegant in the UI? And a lot of it is thinking you have to hide a lot of things in the UI and make them only appear the moment someone needs them, right? Because otherwise it's clutter. So that was the design aim for the product.
When people look at, I just had a conversation with some people today that don't have a basic list of any kind at all. And I'm still like, oh, 2021, this is a 20+ year old experience. You're a little behind, but okay. When we look at things like marketing automation, though, I mean, I'm friends with, connected to, related to, have done events with almost all of them at this point. We use Infusionsoft for my primary email system here. I'm just as happy on any other platform. Nathan is a great guy over at ConvertKit. Like the space is full of good and interesting people. My question in there is that there's a lot of things being done a lot of different ways. What are people seeking the most out of the jumble, so to speak? And like, if you did it again today, someone said to you, Rob, I know you're kind of running Tiny Seed, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but like, you should just think up another automation platform or something. One, would you? And two, what hasn't been conquered? What's the final frontier? So like, what's in the mix that people are dying for now? And where's the enterprise going next?
That's such an interesting question, because I feel like there is a revamping of all of these apps every, let's say, 5 to 10 years, because you develop legacy, so even like ConvertKit and Drip, which are the new apps are like 7, 8 years old now.
Right.
And if I were to start something today, you could now look at, well, what are they doing, and how could you improve upon it? The challenge becomes, you need so much money or so much time just to get to feature parity at this point. Like to build the basics of a Drip, a ConvertKit, a MailChimp, an Infusionsoft would probably take me, I don't know, $500,000 in 2 years, or $1 million in 2 years. It's just, there's so much feature richness there. So what I've seen kind of happening and working these days is approaches that almost zig when everyone else is zagging, right? So the zag, everyone's zagging is, let's add more features, more automations, more this. But I don't know if you've heard of SendFox, which is by Sumo, right? It's by Noah Kagan. It's super stripped down. It's $49 for a lifetime subscription. So it's not monthly, but then there's all these add-ons. So we start simple. I mean, I think that's a great idea for folks who you're talking about. It's like 20 years in, we don't have an email list. SendFox or MailChimp, or even ConvertKit, right, has a free plan. And so does MailChimp, which has always had a really good one. But SendFox, I think, has taken an interesting thing, and I bet they're going to get traction, knowing Noah Kagan.
Knowing Noah.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is email. So I've had, let's just say, depending on how you count, more than 10 different startups, companies, whatever, and all of them have been vastly improved by using email. So I view email as something that's going to continue to be powerful, even though there are companies like Hey, which is an inbox. And they are like very high privacy, so they're kind of blocking open rates and all this stuff. But I still believe email is here to stay. But with that in mind, there are these other kind of the what's next is, it's systems like, a Drip or Infusionsoft, where they have email, they have SMS, they have they have Facebook Messenger and like in-app chat, because people don't just want to get your emails. They want it's called omnichannel, where they can talk to you in 10 different channels, and it's what they want. It's like, oh, you have a Waze. They want to like Waze you, and you should Waze them back or whatever. No, Waze is not the right. This is how old I am. I mean, WhatsApp. I was
thinking Waze when you said it. I was like, I don't want to push the button.
It's a mapping app. Yeah, but it's like with the WhatsApp or these messaging apps, the messaging thing. I mean, that so I left Drip in 2016. No, in 2018. And that was a big conversation that we were having then as I was exiting, was like, I think this is, the puck is going, or even is already there in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that a lot too. And one of the things I've been seeing is that, for everyone who says this is it, Slack's here, forget it. I mean, Slack cut all my internal email down to nothing. There is no internal email at my company anymore. And thank you, Stuart. And there's a lot of other platforms like that. But when anyone wants to say that email marketing is dead, it's still just a little more than 84% of my revenue is pure email marketing. It's one way or another. It came through an inbox, and it came from a .com email address.
Yep.
So, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. When you pointed out the fact that the omnichannel and the multi-messaging, though, I have friends throughout the day who will span me basically. I'll be spanning a various bunch of platforms. So I'll get an Instagram DM or something with a cute meme or something, and then I'll get a tweet that someone thought was also relevant, same person, and then into like Signal or WhatsApp or any of those platforms. And that sort of fluidity is just because the device and the face of the device makes it so much easier not to even think about that anymore. Would you say that people need to think that way now forevermore? I mean, we've said mobile first for so long before, and no one still does it, but people still seem to want to think that it's a laptop world. And it really is just a mobile world. When you work with Tiny Seed companies, do you talk about that first? Do you get that part of their philosophy before you finally say you could be on the cohort?
We don't often dig in. I mean, basically we look as like, is what you're doing working,
Okay.
and that's more the evaluation process. Kind of, or we'll give you advice, we'll help you move forward, but we wouldn't dig in that far, I think, up front. But no, the mobile first thing, I mean, there was the tipping point was maybe 3 or 4 years ago where more email is now opened on mobile devices than on desktop, right? And I think that was I think I was still running Drip when that happened. Wow. And so yeah, have to be mobile first. And that's what a lot of these nice platforms do, is they allow you to just get a template that is mobile friendly, and it just works, right? The omni-channel stuff, personally, that's the thing. Do I think the puck's going there? Yes. Do I want to go there? I'm 46 years old. You saw me confuse WhatsApp and Waze. Like, yes, I use Facebook, I use Messenger, I'm on Instagram, but I'm not big in all of the messaging ecosystem. But the 30s, the 20s, the teens, I have kids who are in their teens, and like, that's where this puck is going in the long term. If we looked out 5-10 years, can I still, all my email lists, like I run a conference called MicroConf. I run an accelerator you mentioned called Tiny Seed. I have a podcast called Startups for the Rest of Us. I have lists for all of these things. And am I going omnichannel personally? No, but I can also reach, my audience is 20s, 30s, 40s startup founders usually, or aspiring founders, and they do read their email, and they do open it. But man, my 14-year-old, just to get him to open up his Gmail, no. So that's where in 5 to 10 years, if you are catering to that audience, you want that 18 to 24 demographic, or whatever it is, you are going to have to think, hey, that's where we're headed. So it really does depend on your audience. Again, if I was marketing my parents who were in their late 70s, like email or Facebook really are the only two places. So you do have to be aware of where your people reside, your community.
Yeah, my little guy is going to be 15. It's Twitter DMs or Discord for him. And the old guy is 18, and it's Instagram or now Discord, because the other one got him into Discord. So
yeah,
which is weird too, because that used to be a gaming messaging platform, but
no, and it really is. It's I mean, Chris, it's what we've been talking about for 15, 20 years. It's be where your customers are, know them well, customers and audience or whoever, and know them well enough, because it was 20 years ago. Well, it was like kind of the advent of blogs, right? And then podcast is now a big thing. And as you and I both know, so that's really more of what it's reaching people where you want to reach them. Now, the one thing I will say is, you've probably heard this term, because I think we both know Brian Clark of Copyblogger, formerly of Copyblogger, and digital sharecropping is what he says. And it's, hey, you can build an audience on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all these things, but you don't own it. And until you have someone's email address, you can be banned. You can be accidentally blocked. I think you mentioned that, that this happens relatively frequently, where people are accidentally blocked. Suddenly your audience is gone, and you don't control it. So I always view, I have YouTube and podcasts and all these things, but I view them as a way it's a hub and spoke, where those are the spokes, and the hub is my personal, my website, thetinyseed.com, robwalling.com, whatever. And then ultimately it's the email list, the money and the influences in the list, in my opinion.
You live or die by your database was advice I got from Jeff Pulver when he hired me in end of 06. And he said, that was the second thing he told me. He's trying to give me his view of entrepreneurship. He said, you live or die by your database. And he ran an event called Vaughn, which for the very longest time was the event for voice over IP. And he did something so clever. He charged like telcos massive amounts of money for the tickets, like $2,500 each for a ticket. But the end user who was being sent didn't pay that $2,500. And so he invested so much of that money into like the Counting Crows were there and all that, way before that's what, is kind of expected of like, a SaaS event of any size. But it to me, it's a story of, making sure you love on the people you have the opportunity to. And to me, it still hasn't gone away from email. I want to talk for just a second about the podcast, because, the event we can't talk so much about unless it probably went virtual like everybody else. Misery. Well, as a professional speaker, I've seen a lot of my house. The podcast, though, it's kind of fun because, you talk most specifically to bootstrappers, and you talk most specifically to people who are kind of not yet believing in themselves, or almost believing in themselves, but are surrounded by a lot of people saying no. What do you feel is the biggest reward of that experience? And what's like a great episode for you? Like when you like hit this episode?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest reward, I like to say, I started an event and a podcast and a blog to make enough money to justify the time that I spend helping people. I am people have described me as a founder or an entrepreneur /teacher. And that's just kind of what I've always done. I've always really wanted to teach other people. And it's a genuine, like, bottom of my heart. I blogged for 4 years before making $1 off it. Not for the money, for sure. I did it because I was like, I want to share what I know. Well, it turns out there are advantages to doing that. You know, you build the audience, you build a network, and you build friends. The big reward for me, got to be honest, is you get the email that's like, you don't know me. You've literally changed my life. You know, this episode or that episode. Now I run a business that's 10K a month. I don't work a shitty job anymore. My wife, I got an email like a month ago. A guy said, I do actually know this guy, but he came to MicroConf and he said, I'm making 20K a month for my products now. I never thought I could live in my home country or where my parents immigrated from. I was Taiwan. And now I'm moving there with my family. And like, we're going to spend a few years there. And I have the flexibility because of stuff that I learned from, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's the legacy, man. You know, again, when I look ahead 20, 30 years and I think, what am I going to look back on my life that I'm really proud of? It's not going to be the lines of code that I wrote when I was a developer. You know, it's not going to be the lines of copy that I wrote. It's going to be the lives that I was able to impact. So that's a big thing for me. I forgot what was the second part of your question? Oh, an episode.
Right.
Oh man, you know, there's let me think. It's hard. We've done 530 of them. It's hard. I mean, I think if you're early, there's one called Fears. It's episode 33, I believe, 30 or 33. It's like the terror of first, or the biggest fears that keep you down, or something. And it's one that I've actually brought back, and one of the only episodes I brought back and repeated in the feed because it was like 10 years later. I was like, this is all still applicable. It's just about being scared of writing a blog post, publishing a podcast, being in on an interview, public speaking, writing about these things, starting a company. They're all scary the first time you do it. And then after a while, you just get good at it, you know?
There's a quote. This is not related to anything per se, but I remember hearing it on must have been This Week in Tech or something like that. And it was, I'm just trying to do two things at once. I'm just going to put an @ to your podcast so people can go find it on the tweeters, Startups Pod. And Jason Calacanis was on, and he was saying something about, you know, it's the weirdest thing. Like, once you figure out how to make $1 million once, you can make $1 million a bunch of times in a row. But then you're like, how do I get up 5 million? And then you get 5 million figured out and you go, I could totally do 5 million a bunch of times in a row. And then he goes, ugh. And then you're thinking 10. And I remember I was so mad when I first heard that advice. I was like, baloney, man. It's not like that. And it's like that. And so it's interesting when you say about fears or bringing something back, or just that whole notion of like, some of these things are circular in the best of ways. There's some episodes. I mean, you could probably start at number 1 again and believe most of what you put up there, give or take, not talking about dig.com or something.
And tech. Oh, we have mentions of that in the early days. Yeah, it's hilarious. Blogger and this and that.
So Rob Walling, it was so great to have a moment to sit down. Thank you for taking some time out and doing that. People can find you at tinyseed.com. You can find at Rob Walling right there. Easy as pie. Thank you so much for giving some time today.
It's my pleasure, sir. Thanks for having me on.
I probably have a button I could push.